The silence was deafening. You know that moment when an entire restaurant just stops? When every conversation dies, every fork stops clinking, and even the kitchen goes quiet. That's what happened when my fiancé looked my mother dead in the eye and said those two words. Get out. But here's the thing that nobody in that restaurant knew. Not my mother, not my aunt, not even the waiter who was frozen halfway to our table with a bread basket. My fiancé didn't just tell her to leave the restaurant. He owned it. I'm sitting there, watching my mother's face go from smug superiority to confusion to something I'd never seen before. Fear. You see, my mother had just called the man I love trash. She said it loud enough for the tables around us to hear. She said it with that same tone she'd used my entire childhood whenever she wanted to remind me that I wasn't good enough. But this time, she picked the wrong target. This time, she had no idea who she was dealing with. And honestly, neither did I. I mean, I knew my fiancé was successful. I knew he worked in real estate. I knew he was comfortable. But sitting there, watching him pull out his phone, watching him make one quick call, watching the manager rush over with panic in his eyes, that's when I realized I was about to witness something I'd been dreaming about for 28 years. My mother was about to learn that her words finally had consequences. The restaurant was so quiet, you could hear her breathing. Fast, shallow, like she was trying to figure out how this had all gone so wrong, so quickly. But I knew exactly how we got here. It started 28 years ago. Let me paint you a picture of what it's like to grow up with a mother who treats you like her personal disappointment. My mother, Linda, came from money. Old money. The kind where your great-grandfather's name is still on buildings downtown. She married my father, who also came from money, and together they lived in this bubble where anyone who wasn't born with a trust fund was automatically beneath them. Me? I was their accident. Not their mistake, their accident. Because mistakes can be fixed. Accidents just have to be endured. Growing up, I remember this one time. I was maybe 8 years old, and I wanted to invite my friend Sarah to my birthday party. Sarah's dad worked at the grocery store, and her mom cleaned houses. My mother looked at me with this expression, like I'd asked to invite a raccoon to dinner. Sweetheart, she said, and I can still hear that condescending tone. We don't associate with people like that. It's not their fault. They're poor, but we have standards. Standards. That word haunted my entire childhood. When I was 12, I made the mistake of having a crush on a boy named Marcus. His family lived in the apartments across town. Not the nice apartments, the subsidized ones. My mother found out when she saw me talking to him after school. She didn't yell. She never yelled. Yelling was beneath her standards. Instead, she sat me down in our pristine living room with the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars, and she explained, very calmly, why I was embarrassing our family. What would people think, she said, if they saw you with someone like that? His mother works at the diner, for goodness sake. I was 12. 12 years old, and already learning that in my mother's world, your worth as a human being was determined by your bank account. But here's the thing that really shaped me. When I was 16, I got a job. Not because we needed the money, but because I wanted to earn something for myself. I worked at a small bookstore downtown. The owner, Mrs. Chin, was this incredible woman who had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She built that bookstore from the ground up, working 18-hour days, and she treated me like family. When my mother found out about my job, she was mortified. People will think we can't afford to support our own daughter, she said. You're making us look desperate. She made me quit. She literally drove to the bookstore, marched inside, and told Mrs. Chin that I wouldn't be coming back. She didn't care that I loved that job. She didn't care that Mrs. Chin was counting on me. All she cared about was what the country club ladies would think. That's when I learned the most important lesson of my childhood. In my mother's world, perception was more important than reality. Image was more important than happiness. And money was more important than humanity. Fast forward to college. I went to the state school instead of the Ivy League because I wanted to study education. I wanted to teach. My mother acted like I'd announced I was becoming a circus performer. Teachers, she said, with the same tone, someone might say, serial killers don't make any money. How will you maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to? But I didn't want their lifestyle. I wanted to matter. I wanted to help kids who came from families like Mrs. Chen's. Kids who were told they weren't good enough because their parents worked with their hands instead of their trust funds. So I became a teacher. And my mother treated it like a personal attack. Every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call was a reminder that I was disappointing them, that I was choosing to associate with those people. When I started dating, it got worse. Every guy I brought home was subjected to her judgment. Too poor. Wrong job. Wrong family. Wrong car. Wrong everything. I stopped bringing them home. Let me know in the comments where you are watching this video from. I'd love to know if you've ever had a parent like this. But then, 2 years ago, I met David, and everything changed. David was different from anyone I'd ever dated. Not because he was wealthy, though I was starting to suspect he was doing better than he let on, but because when I told him about my family, about my mother's obsession with status, he just listened. No judgment. No advice. Just listened. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, he said. Especially not to people who should love you unconditionally. It was the first time in my entire life someone had said that to me. We'd been together for about a year when he asked me to marry him. Simple proposal. No drama. Just, I love you and I want to spend my life with you. I said yes, obviously. But then came the hard part. Telling my family. My mother's reaction was exactly what I expected. What does he do? She asked, before even saying congratulations. He's in real estate, I told her. She made this face, like she smelled something rotten. Real estate, she repeated. Like, selling houses? To regular people. He develops properties, Mom. He's very successful. Successful how? What's his net worth? What's his family name? Where did he go to school? Question after question, like she was conducting a background check for the FBI. I refused to answer. David's worth wasn't measured in dollars. But trying to explain that to my mother was like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind their entire life. She insisted on meeting him. A family dinner, she said. At the country club, of course. David agreed, though I could see he wasn't thrilled. He'd heard enough stories about my family to know what he was walking into. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked him. They're going to be awful. He squeezed my hand. I can handle whatever they throw at me. The question is, are you ready to watch them try? I thought I was. I was wrong. The dinner was at Meridian. This upscale steakhouse that my family had been going to for decades. The kind of place where the waiters know your order before you sit down and the wine list costs more than most people's rent. David picked me up in his usual car. A nice car, but not flashy. He never showed off. It was something I loved about him, but I knew my mother would see it as a red flag. We walked in, and I could already see my mother's disappointed face from across the room. She was sitting with my Aunt Carol, who was just as awful, but quieter about it. They were both dressed like they were attending a charity gala instead of dinner with their own family. "There she is," my mother said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. My daughter, the teacher. Not my daughter or even just my name. My daughter, the teacher. Like my profession was some kind of embarrassing medical condition. David didn't flinch. We sat down and immediately the interrogation began. "So David," my mother said, cutting into her filet mignon with surgical precision, "tell us about your business." "I develop residential properties," he said. "Mostly affordable housing for young families." I watched my mother's face tighten. "Affordable housing," she repeated. How noble. The way she said noble made it sound like a curse word. "Someone has to provide quality homes for working families," David replied. His voice was calm, but I could see his jaw tightening. "Of course," my Aunt Carol chimed in. "Someone has to cater to that demographic." That demographic. Like working families were some kind of foreign species. The questions got worse from there. "What kind of car do you drive? Where did you go to school? What do your parents do?" Each question delivered with that same condescending tone, like they already knew the answers wouldn't be good enough. David answered every single question with grace. More grace than they deserved. But I could see what was coming. I'd seen this performance my entire life. The setup, the slow build, the final, crushing blow that was designed to make someone feel 2 inches tall. And then it happened. My mother set down her fork, looked directly at David, and smiled. That fake, venomous smile that I knew meant someone was about to get destroyed. "You know, David," she said, loud enough for the tables around us to hear every word. "I have to ask, what exactly do you think you can offer my daughter?" David paused. "I'm sorry." "Well," my mother continued, "she's used to a certain standard of living. Private schools, nice things, quality experiences. And you seem like a very nice young man, but let's be honest, you're just not our kind of people." The restaurant seemed to get quieter. Or maybe that was just the blood rushing in my ears. "Mom," I started to say, but she held up her hand. She wasn't done. "I mean, no offense, but look around. This is where we eat on a casual Tuesday. Can you even afford to bring my daughter somewhere like this?" David was silent. Completely silent. Just staring at her. And then my mother delivered the final blow. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said, looking directly at me, "but I can't support you marrying trash." Trash. She called the man I love trash. In front of an entire restaurant. And that's when David smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a nervous smile. A smile that said, "You have no idea what you just did." He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and made one very quick call. "Marcus," he said. "It's David. I'm at Meridian right now, and I need you to come to table 12 immediately." He hung up, looked at my mother, and said, "Get out." Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. The next 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. My mother just sat there, blinking, like she couldn't process what David had just said. "Excuse me," she finally managed. "You heard me," David said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something cold. "Get out." "Young man," my Aunt Carol sputtered. "You can't just tell people to leave a restaurant." David didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on my mother's face. "Actually," he said, "I can." And that's when the manager appeared. Marcus was a tall man, maybe 50, with graying hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. He was practically jogging to our table, and when he arrived, he was slightly out of breath. "Mr. Richardson," he said, and I swear, I felt my heart skip a beat. "Is everything all right?" "Mr. Richardson." Not David. Not Sir. "Mr. Richardson." Like he knew him. "No, Marcus," David said, never breaking eye contact with my mother. "Everything is not all right. These people are disturbing my dinner." I watched my mother's face go through about 12 different emotions. Confusion. Realization. Panic. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Richardson," Marcus said. "I'll take care of this immediately." He turned to my mother with a smile that wasn't really a smile. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you and your party to leave." My mother found her voice. "This is absolutely ridiculous. We've been coming here for 20 years. 20 years. Do you know who I am?" Marcus looked at David. David nodded. "Ma'am," Marcus said, "Mr. Richardson owns this restaurant. He owns the building. He owns the parking lot you walked across. And right now, he's asking you to leave." The silence was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear the air conditioning. I could hear someone at another table trying not to cough. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible," she whispered. David finally looked at me. There was something in his eyes. Not anger, but sadness. Like he was disappointed that it had come to this. "I'm sorry you had to see this," he said to me. I really hoped they'd surprise me. He turned back to my mother. "You want to know what I can offer your daughter?" he asked. "I can offer her respect. Something you've never given her in her entire life." My mother was pale. Like ghost pale. She kept looking around, like she was hoping someone would tell her this was all a joke. "David," she said, and for the first time in my entire life, I heard my mother sound small. "It's Mr. Richardson," he corrected. "And you need to leave. Now." Other diners were starting to stare. Openly. The kind of staring that happens when you're witnessing a complete social meltdown. My Aunt Carol grabbed my mother's arm. "Linda," she hissed. "We need to go. Now." But my mother wasn't done. She was never good at losing. And this was the biggest loss of her life. "You think you're so clever," she said, her voice getting louder. "But money doesn't make you classy. You'll always be new money. You'll always be trash." David interrupted. "Is that what you were going to say?" My mother stopped talking. "Because that's what you called me. In front of your daughter. In front of everyone here. You called me trash." He stood up. Slowly. And suddenly, David looked different. Taller. More imposing. "I've been nothing but respectful to you. I've listened to your questions. I've answered your interrogations. I've sat here while you insulted my job, my background, my worth as a human being." Other conversations in the restaurant had completely stopped. Everyone was listening. But when you call me trash in front of the woman I love, that's where this ends. Marcus stepped closer. Ma'am, sir, I really need you to gather your things and leave. Security is on their way. Security. That's when my mother realized she had lost. Completely. Utterly. Lost. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands. My Aunt Carol was already standing, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. This isn't over, my mother said, but even she didn't sound convinced. David sat back down. Yes, he said. It is. And then the most amazing thing happened. As my mother and my aunt were walking toward the exit, other diners started to clap. Slowly at first. Just one person. Then another. Then the entire restaurant was applauding. They were clapping for David. For standing up to a bully. For defending someone he loved. My mother walked out to the sound of an entire restaurant cheering her exit. And I just sat there, staring at the man I was going to marry, realizing I didn't know him at all. You own this restaurant, I said, after the applause finally died down. It wasn't a question. It was me trying to process what had just happened. David nodded. I own several restaurants and about 40 other properties in this city. I stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because, he said, I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have. Your mother just proved why that was the right choice. The waiter appeared at our table. Nervous. Apologetic. Mr. Richardson, I'm so sorry about that disturbance. Can I bring you anything? Dessert? Coffee? Everything tonight is on the house, of course. David looked at me. Do you want to stay? I shook my head. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to understand what my life was about to become. Can we go home? I asked. Of course. The drive to my apartment was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Like we were both processing what had just happened. When we got to my door, I finally found my voice. How much are you worth? I asked. David smiled. That same genuine smile that made me fall in love with him. Does it matter? It matters because I need to know if I'm marrying who I thought I was marrying or someone completely different. He took my hands. I'm the same person who brings you coffee every morning. I'm the same person who watches terrible movies with you on Sunday. I'm the same person who loves that you teach kids to read. He was right. He was exactly the same. The only thing that had changed was my mother's perception of him. And honestly, that made everything better. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother. 3 from my Aunt Carol. 2 from my father, who rarely called unless someone was dying. The voicemails were something else. The first one, from my mother, was angry. How dare you embarrass our family like that? Call me immediately. The second one was desperate. Sweetheart, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. By the 10th one, she was practically begging. Please, call me back. We can work this out. My Aunt Carol's messages were similar. Panic. Damage control. Desperation. But my father's were different. Your mother told me what happened. I want you to know. I'm proud of you for finding someone who stands up for you. Call me when you're ready. I didn't call any of them. Not that day. Not the next day. Instead, I did some research. Richardson Development was bigger than I'd imagined. Not just local properties. David owned commercial real estate in 6 states. His company employed over 300 people. But here's what impressed me most. 60% of his properties were affordable housing. He wasn't just building homes for rich people. He was building communities for working families. Everything my mother had mocked him for was actually exactly what made him incredible. A week went by. Then, my mother started getting creative. She sent flowers with a note that said, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. Like calling someone trash could be a misunderstanding. Then, she sent a gift basket. Expensive cheese. Fancy crackers. A bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Then, the letters started. Handwritten letters. On her monogram stationery. Letters about family. About forgiveness. About moving forward. But never an actual apology. Never acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just damage control. David was patient. He never said, "I told you so." He never pushed me to cut contact. He just supported whatever I decided. "They're your family," he said. "You have to live with whatever choice you make." 2 weeks after the restaurant incident, my father showed up at my apartment. Alone. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in. Made coffee. Sat across from him at my kitchen table. "Your mother," he said, "is terrified." Of what? Of losing you. Of losing our family. Of everyone finding out what she did. He paused. Took a sip of his coffee. "But mostly, she's terrified that she was wrong about everything. She was wrong about everything." "I know," he said. "And deep down, so does she." My father looked older. Tired. Like he'd been carrying a heavy weight. "She wants to apologize. Really apologize. But she doesn't know how. She could start with the word sorry. She's not good at being wrong. You know that. She's never had to be." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "Dad, are you here because you want our family back together, or because you're afraid of what David might do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Both," he finally said. "Your mother made some calls. Found out more about David's business interests. She's scared that he might what? Might have influence that could affect our social standing." And there it was. Even now, even after everything, it wasn't about being sorry. It was about protecting their reputation. "You can tell Mom," I said, "that David isn't vindictive. He's not going to destroy your social life or whatever she's worried about. But I'm done pretending that the way she treated me my entire life was acceptable." My father nodded. "What do you want from us?" "I want her to mean it when she apologizes. I want her to understand that money doesn't make you better than anyone else. And I want her to treat David with respect. And if she can't?" I looked out my kitchen window. David was picking me up in an hour. We were going to look at wedding venues. "Then she won't be at my wedding." My father left with that message. 3 days later, I got a phone call from my mother. Her voice was different, quieter, smaller. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Yes," I said. "You do." I was wrong. About David. About the things I said. About the way I've treated you. She paused. I could hear her breathing. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything I wanted to hear. But it was a start. Thank you, I said. Can we try again? All of us. I thought about it. Really thought about it. We can try, I said. But things are different now. I'm different now. I understand. And maybe she actually did. 6 months later, David and I got married. It was a beautiful wedding. Small, intimate, just the people we actually wanted there. My mother came. She wore appropriate dress. She smiled at the right moments. She even hugged David after the ceremony. But more importantly, she kept her mouth shut. No comments about the venue. No suggestions about the guest list. No passive-aggressive remarks about our life choices. It was progress. The real change came slowly. Family dinners, where my mother actually asked David about his work instead of interrogating him. Holiday gatherings, where she treated him like family. Don't get me wrong. She's still my mother. She still has opinions about everything. She still occasionally says things that make me cringe. But she learned something important that night at the restaurant. Words have consequences. Actions have consequences. And sometimes the person you're trying to hurt has more power than you realize. David never used his influence against my family. He never tried to embarrass them or damage their reputation. That's not who he is. But they know now that he could have. And that knowledge changed everything. My mother learned to respect not just David, but me. Because she finally understood that I'd found someone who would defend me. Someone who wouldn't let anyone treat me badly. Even her. Looking back, I'm actually grateful for that horrible dinner. Because it forced every truth into the open. It made my family confront their own ugly behavior. And it showed me exactly who David really was. Not just a successful businessman. Not just someone with money, but someone with integrity. Someone who uses his success to build communities, to help families. Someone who loves me enough to fight for me. The funny thing is, my mother and David actually get along pretty well now. She still doesn't understand his passion for affordable housing, but she respects it. And she respects him. And maybe that's enough. I learned something that night, too. I learned that you can love your family without accepting their bad behavior. You can set boundaries. You can demand respect. And sometimes you need someone in your corner to help you find the courage to do it. David gave me that courage. Not because he's wealthy. Not because he owns restaurants and buildings. But because he saw my worth when my own family couldn't. And that is worth more than all the money in the world. If you liked this story, check out this other one on the screen. It's about a woman who discovered her husband's secret and turned his own family against him. See you there.